There you go. Great.
Okay, so I think we should get started. We'll see maybe popping in after a little bit. But it's wonderful to have so many people here for our school board legislative committee. For those of you who are here, for the first time, we usually meet 2 or 3 times during the session to try to get a handle on which bills may have the biggest impact for our district. And then the work in this committee is to try to narrow down from the hundreds to maybe only 10 to track, which we fail at and have 50. And try to make recommendations to the school board on bills that we may want to have. And we focus on issues around student health and safety, around funding public education and school construction, around empowering our local administrators to set curriculum in our own schools, and around empowering our school board to set policy. So it's mainly around paying the bills, local control, and keeping kids healthy and safe. With that said, we met once earlier in the session to try to whittle down the list of bills that we were going to track. And our very small, but actually not small job today is to try to figure out of all of the ones that are still live and plausibly moving towards passage and towards the governor, which are the ones that we may actually want to recommend that the school board advocate around at this point in the session. So that's sort of where we're at today. We have 2 guests here from the New Hampshire School Board Association. We have one of our high school students here who participated in Student Government Day and bravely decided that that wasn't enough. Yeah. And I think everybody is up to speed on sort of the packet of bills. I emailed that around. Does everybody have that?
So I was late getting to you today.
So
I think changed since yesterday.
rather than use up speaking time, we turn it over to you with our very simple question of what's actually going to get through that we're most worried about that we should really try and focus on advocacy around at this stage. Some stuff has died.
Some things have
That
been
we're
great.
not
Some
proud
haven't.
about.
Today. Not most of you, but I'm Becky Wilson. I'm the Director of Governmental Relations for the New Hampshire School Boards Association. This is Barry Christina, he's our Executive Director. And I am really grateful for you all having your own legislative committee. And I know that a lot of work has been done in the last couple of years to try to make this a little bit, more routine and a little bit formal in terms of how you're making those decisions. So what I brought with me is just a quick handout that Friday we were having a webinar for the updated legislative summary for all school board members. So I've been putting some things together, and one of the pieces, the question we get often is about where are we in the state budget process. So this first piece of paper that's in your packet is just an overview of sort of the process in general. We are at the tail end of the House phase, just in case anybody has a question about where we are. So as I'm sure Representative Marty could speak much more eloquently to than I will, the House will vote on the state budget on the floor on Thursday. There are bound to be more amendments, I'm sure, Thursday maybe on the floor potentially. And so we won't know what the House version really looks like until Friday or so, but it's about the House Bill 2, which is the trailer bill, which talks all about what's in the budget. I think last time I looked was about 186 pages of narrative, some of which will be problematic for local school districts. And we can talk a little bit about that at the end, or you can ask me questions about that later as we go. But the second piece in this packet, these are the bills that you had sent me at the beginning of the session that you were watching and thinking about. They're coded all the way to the right. There's some codes on there. So anything that has the red words past crossing over to the other body, those are the bills that are still alive currently. And as you go through, you'll see that some of them are coming up on Thursday. So they won't say they're passed. They'll say April 10th. Those are the ones that are still kind of outstanding and have to be voted on this week. You might also see some that are, it'll say ITL. Those are the ones that are no longer alive currently and expedient to legislate. So those you can cross off automatically unless somehow they come back from the dead, which occasionally happens, but it's not as common. And then you will see some that are retained, which means the committee is not pushing them forward for a vote, they still have work they need to do. So they're not dead, but they're not probably going to move anywhere right this minute. They'll hold on to them and work on them through the early fall, over the summer. Trying to think of any other things that you might see on here, retained and expedient to legislate passing. You might see one that says indefinitely postponed. That's a special motion where they can't bring it up again until the end of the biennium, so it won't come back at least until 2027. But those are generally what's on here. Anything that says amended, the yellow language, that means when you're going into your tracking software to look at the bills, make sure you're looking at the amended version, because the introduced version, sometimes the little blurb in Fast Democracy that says this bill is about blah, 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 blah. It's not always updated to the amended version of the bill. So you want to make sure if you're going in there and using that tracking link that you have, that you're looking at the amended version, and it should say it right on the right-hand side. It will say as amended by the House or as amended by the Senate. So the good news about this is I will resort this list for you today if you want after we talk, and anything that is ITL'd or retained, you can either cross off altogether or decide you still kind of want to keep an eye on it, but you don't need to pay as much attention to that as you were previously, because some of those will be done for the moment. Questions about that? So if we look at, I'm just going to resort your list on here on my own brain power. And I know Representative Murray probably doesn't have as much time, so if there's anything you want to talk to her about while I'm resorting this list, that would be a good time, probably.
I'm actually fine.
Okay. Okay.
Well, let us ask you one question, because we do have, once we put this to our school board and the board passes positions, then we are in a position to go and testify. So assuming on some of these issues, like for example, trying to keep our funding here instead of sending it to Concord, I mean, we're very much in line with the city on that. If there are moments when we can be helpful to the process and most strategic, and when we can come, you know, as everyone else who's involved in this work knows, we have full-time jobs and all these other things, but if there are moments when we can back up your work and you can let us know where you think it would be most helpful to have us come and testify.
At this point, you're gonna go to the Senate.
Yep.
Because the House is pretty much done. There will be some things that come back to the House, but in terms of the whole budget, you're gonna be going to the Senate. And so.
One of the challenges, if I could add on to that, is so many of the amendments to the state budget were that amendment, they were introduced during work session, so there's no opportunity for public comment. Regardless, the retention of the swept money is a perfect example. House bills, you know, the amendment that was in 675 that they're gonna throw in above the 3% spending cap every year. Unfortunately, you know, so many of these, you know, if you were watching the budget process, you know, the YouTubes, they would vote on something at 11:45, they'd break for lunch. Somebody got a talking to during lunchtime and they came back and they would reconsider the motion, and somebody else, the person who voted yes or no, changed their vote within that hour. So they got called up to leadership or.
That's what happened with the DEI.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, the other thing is, you might want to hang on to some retained bills if they're retained in finance, because like 675. Right, you know, 675 is in the budget. And so, you know, those are the things to try to get out. And like you said, we're not gonna know what it's gonna look like until after Thursday's Friday.
I do want to say publicly, I want to thank Representative Martin for her voice at the table on Vision 2 finance, because she really is an excellent advocate for all of you, and I will, you know, certainly brings up concerns that I know I've also heard from other people next year. Representative Martin is a tireless advocate on behalf, so despite that it doesn't always come out of the committee as he would wish, I think on the record at least the concern would be having source of on your local districts. I think Representative Murray does a very good job.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Trying to get those points across, sometimes on deaf ears. So. All right, so if we go through this tracking list, we can run through quickly sort of the things that are still alive. I think that's probably the best way to go at it. And if there are some that you're like, we don't have the capacity to care as much about that one anymore, I think that is, you know, this is a one way to do that. Zach, if you have a
Well,
different idea.
I'm just gonna say I think it's a combination of what's dead, so we don't have to worry about that. And what's probably over. That already.
I was gonna
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, whether you can read the tea leaves and it's like, no matter what we're doing.
If
And
it's
the
all
policy,
you opposed,
Yeah.
if it's not, if there's no, it's not gonna change the impact of the outcome, then don't spend any time on it. We identified that from the beginning of the session, what we were gonna, where we're gonna spend our time and effort, if we want. to spend our time.
and we, there might be certain issues that we want to weigh in on because we want to make sure we're showing our values to the community. But I definitely want to be thoughtful about, the two ends of the spectrum, we're probably not going to make an impact. And we're a couple places where maybe we can hit the focus on both sides.
Right. Within that, I'd say like particularly the funding bills, if there's some where we still have an ability to influence, and I know it's very slim probably, but we would still put the time in. And for a lot of the local control over curriculum bills, we understand that we may be doing this more to speak to our values. There may be some interest in doing that simply because we want to be on record doing.
With respect to with respect, I would recommend, and Representative Murray, if you have other thoughts on this, by all means, please chime in. With respect to the donor town bill. I don't know all the donor towns offhand. I think I know most of them. I could probably name. But if there are any donor towns that are red towns, though, that's who you're gonna want to touch. That's who you're gonna want to talk to. We know that it's Dover and it's Portsmouth and more blue towns, if you will. So, you know, you don't need to change, you don't need to convince them which way. You're gonna have to convince the people in the red donor towns that there are to maybe up leadership.
Oh, and I would add, when you reach out, not just to Rebecca, but to every senator.
So just to clean up bills that have been put now into the current version of the state budget. So we're throwing a lot of numbers around. 675, which is the local school district budget cap. To the length additional, here you go.
Oh, I don't want to take you.
Oh, no, it's totally fine.
I can make copies.
Do you mind? Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Cynthia.
It's back. Sorry, my neighbor's not using that. So House Bill 675, which is the school district's budget cap, which many districts, I know Portsmouth is a city, so it's a bit different, but many of those were voted down at town meeting or at deliberative session. So now that spending cap for districts has been put into the budget as a requirement. There's a formula based on CPI and things like that that will allow the district to not spend more than X amount per year. It's based on your ADMR, I believe, currently, and the CPI, and if you inflate certain amount per year after you take out your facilities and some other things like that. I would keep an eye on that in the budget. I have a feeling it could or could not change. When you were talking about talking with the Senate, I will say the Senate is going to approach the budget a bit differently probably than the House typically does. That's just how they are. There's some things that are in the House budget that I think probably the Senate will adjust or change based on their own values or based on where they're willing to put their energy or whatever else they're trying to get. So I would take the House version of the budget right now a bit with a grain of salt, not because it wasn't done with certain intentions, but because the Senate historically will change it somewhat drastically when it gets over. So the other piece that is in the state budget, the House version of the budget, is a language that mirrors the executive order around DEI and the DEI ban. So the language from that type of executive order federally has been put now into House Bill 2 into the state budget. So it would prohibit schools from participating or having any programming that meets this particular definition of DEI.
Is that one of the House bills?
It's
numbers?
not, no, it just actually was a ad hoc amendment that was put in at the full fiscal committee after all the divisions had handed in all of their work and had voted on their versions of the parts of budget that they have. Was brought to the table by one particular person.
we have a sense of how that's gonna be practically implemented?
You know,
I mean, is it going to just be the DEI policies around staff? Is it gonna hit our curriculum? Is it gonna hit extracurriculars? Do we have any sense of the scope?
It'll go to sport.
Well,
Yeah.
Clearly.
Oh, you know, when we made that point, we already know it's unconstitutional. We went through this with, with the diverse
Oh, yeah.
concepts.
Yeah,
And, you know, it costs millions of dollars to the state. to do
1205
that.
last year, the license concepts here 2 or 3 years ago before that. The book banning bills that they're gonna come up with, we know that the ACLU's probably already got the brief with it. It's a matter of signing, filing it in court.
You know, this really quite literally came in at the last minute. It was, you know, the last hour of the last day, and initially we voted it down. A Democrat had to leave, but it wouldn't have made a difference, although it made much better publicity that a Democrat left. They voted to reconsider and passed it. And the 2 Republicans who voted with us the first time voted with their party the second time. It wouldn't have made a difference if this particular Democrat representative had stayed or not, because they still have the numbers and they twisted the arms to get to change it. But it made not bad optics in terms of Democrat leaves and they vote, you know, they change their vote.
Does it just apply to schools or does it apply to municipalities?
It applies to departments, offices, commissions, boards, subdivisions, any other unit or political subdivisions of this unit. So it applies to pretty much everybody. The DEI language, the definition applies to programs, policies, training, or initiatives.
What is the phrase they used? Characteristic group, so there was a short phrase in there.
Yes. there
Which
is.
was, I don't recall it offhand.
Hold on.
It's very problematic in terms of, you can clearly see this would include veterans. And we do have special programs for veterans, and this includes veterans. It would include a religious group that's doing a particular kind of work. It could very likely include people with developmental disabilities, that whole group. It was just that vague. And so, I mean, there's clearly it's unconstitutional. What that means before the Supreme Court comes back is, you know, another matter, except.
The frustration for many at the 8.2 is that, even so it says for training, the state is not paying for your professional development. If the Portsmouth School District, the city of Portsmouth is paying for your professional development, for your teachers, you should get to decide how that money is spent. You know, I don't know why, if, you know, it used to be, if the state was paying for it, they could dictate what you want to do. Right? If they're not paying for it, I don't understand why they get to dictate what you're going to do. I mean, that's just up to the extent that that's a helpful argument here.
But can they use the argument that we're paying for some things, so we're
Tell
putting
me
the
what
umbrella
you're
on
paying for. I
everything?
mean, there's a little bit of PD money built into the advocacy. State.
The way that it is phrased is there's a separate, so there's the DEI ban that's in House Bill 2. Then there's a special section of it that is specific to public schools. So it says diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, shall mean any program, policy, training, or initiative that classifies individuals based on race, sex, ethnicity, or other group characteristics for the purposes of achieving demographic outcomes rather than treating individuals equally under the law. It's not a definition that's anywhere else in the law. That's just the definition for this section. And then it also applies to higher ed, public higher ed, which is in the past, that has sometimes been the deal breaker. It's including higher ed. Sometimes they can use that as a way to not pass something, but unfortunately that's. And it says no public school shall implement, promote, or otherwise engage in any DEI related initiatives, programs, trainings, or policies. No state funds shall be expended to public schools for DEI related activities, included but not limited to implicit bias training, DEI assessments, critical race theory, race-based hiring, promotion, contracting preferences, blah, blah, blah. So, I think the intention is that it applies to everything under the sun. I think we will have to wait and see, again, to represent Marty's point and Barrett's point. There will be litigation around this if it is to even goes through. There's a whole lot of things that have to happen with the state budget before it is passed. So I think we're in sort of a hurry up and wait situation at the moment, which is to try to attend to it. But also I think, I think we've talked about this before. There's a reasonable amount of attention you should give these things, and at the same time, giving it a lot of attention, maybe giving it a lot more power than perhaps it's required. I think you need, it would move people to be mindful that that's in there. Start talking with each other about what you would do if this were to go in this format, but at the same time, recognize that a lot of other things are going to happen before the budget is finalized. And this may or may not be the language that is included in there. So I think to have some preliminary conversations about what Portsmouth would want to do in terms of, your own values and where you've stood on a lot of these things in the past. Where you want to kind of pick your battle, so to speak, and this may be a place where you want to do that.
Should we do it with the city also? I mean, should it be one uniform decision from the city?
So we do communicate with city legislative committees, so to the extent that we are taking positions, they are generally ones that we in lockstep. And I was gonna wait to the end to give you an update on that meeting.
Yeah, to the extent that there's community of interest, it can't hurt whether obviously the budget. The swept money out. This falls under the umbrella of common resolution or policy that the city school department adopted.
And our city legal department is vetting these from the perspective of how it would, because it can impact police, fire, everybody. So this is one, exactly.
It makes a stronger unit.
And they're monitoring it. So we can be in a position to tell them what the impact is that we envision in
Yeah.
schools, and then we would be in lockstep if we do decide to advocate around this.
And I think to Seth's point, whether you are putting that statement out in hopes of change, which is completely appropriate, or whether you're putting it out so that your, community members and things like that know that you're taking a united front. I think both of those are very valuable for different reasons. Okay, so let's go through this list. I will go through kind of quickly, and then maybe we can go back and revisit any of the ones that we want to attend to. So House Bill 10, which is the House's version of the Parental Bill of Rights, is still alive. It has been amended, and that is at the Senate. They just had their hearing on that last week. So the next thing that will happen with this bill is that the Senate Education Committee will have an executive session to determine how they want to bring that to the board, what motion they want to take.
That's gonna pass.
And our board took a position against this in previous years. And
Correct.
So this would.
That's the bill I would not spend a ton of time on.
Well, and there is a Senate version as well.
Some version of it.
Yeah.
So they will have to, at some point, the legislature will have to decide if they're going to either, give in to either side's version or whether they're going to the committee of confidence. So there will still be opportunity to weigh in on that over time.
So quick question on that. So,
Yes.
so if it's gonna go through, but there are key provisions that we could push on, what are those provisions that feel like they're a little bit more in play at the moment? I know it might be really hard to read,
So the House version, they just get back, so it's sorted by the wrong. No, and I don't want to mix up the two versions. It's not anyone's fault, there's just a lot happening. So the Senate version and the House version are slightly different. The House version has some health aspects to it, like medical aspects, whereas I believe the education version that came from the Senate is just an education bill of rights.
Yeah.
So I do think if you want to look at the two, they are, some version of them will go through. Most of the things that are in these two bills are already in existence. They're just not all put into place. And that's been sort of an argument for not needing these bills. Most of the parental rights that they're talking about already exist.
Right.
So I think you could go through and look at things that maybe are not covered under current law, which could certainly help you with that, and say, why is this a necessary thing? The proponents of these bills are saying, well, it's all in one place so a parent can find it more easily. And wouldn't that be a good thing to have? There was some attempt last year and this year to say, well, if they're already in existence and the issue is parents can't find them, have the Department of Ed put together some sort of booklet that can be shared with parents that says, here's where all your rights, here's a summary of your rights, and here's where you can find them in the law. That's never quite gone through. So I think.
So in the House version, that includes the health language. Is that seen as a proxy around gender identity type issue? And it doesn't exist in the Senate language, so.
Yeah, it talks a lot more about what kind of consent older students could give or older children could give without disclosure to the parents automatically versus what, right now. Students who are over, the kids who are over the age of 16, for example, I believe it is, or maybe even younger, might be 14, can access reproductive health care or birth control without their parents' consent, so to speak, or without automatic disclosure to parents. Some of those kinds of things are included in that version, whereas the other version is simply just education rights.
Okay.
So they are a little bit different. And I think the disciplinary aspects of each bill is slightly different as well. I'd have to go back and look and see which one. Some have a heftier disciplinary penalty for teachers than the other. If they go against
I
the.
assume the House version has a bigger penalty.
That's
I mean, I'm bad hands.
All right, so HB 10 still moving. House Bill 50, relative to intentional or knowing violation of the prohibition on teaching discrimination. This also has been amended. It is in the Senate. It has not yet had a hearing. So that is still moving on. Again, this is one of those times where I would certainly look at the amended language because the original bill from Representative Petrino was basically trying to, again, buoy up the fact that teachers should be able to teach the way they need to teach, to present historical facts and things like that without worrying about some sort of criminal penalty. It's now been a little bit hijacked.
The interesting thing about the bills is that I think unknowingly Representative Petrino, former teacher, which is bill, if this bill goes through and a couple of the other bills go through, it's going to ameliorate the unconstitutionality of the divisive concepts law. So I know that's what the Republicans are trying to do. They're trying to pass either 2 or 3 bills that the part that the courts found unconstitutional, they're trying to amend that a little bit. So they've got a better argument at the First Circuit Court of Appeals in Boston when the federal court system hears that case.
They're trying to make it less vague. So that was the complaint. It was too vague. And that's why teachers couldn't comply with it. Now they're saying, okay, well, we'll just make it less vague. But in doing so, they've put in some stricter language around what teachers can and cannot teach. And also some other penalties in terms of the code of conduct and things. So it's really not a great, it's become a terrible version of a good intentioned bill, I believe.
And I don't want to hijack the whole list, but we were also watching some separate bills that give DOE potential subpoena power. And we were a little concerned about what the combination of some of these and subpoena power.
Oh, it's all tied together. It's all tied together.
But yes, that's what we spend a lot of time trying to figure out threads between things.
Do we believe the subpoena bills are coming over here too? Do we think?
Subpoena bill.
Well, they'd already passed out.
Sorry.
HB 50 is one that the NEA strongly opposes.
Yeah. Because it's been hijacked. I mean, for lack of a better term, wasn't originally a lot of people supported it, including the NEA, because it was to remove that divisive concepts. But this is the tricky part now, is they don't always change everything in the system, so that's not really what it is anymore. House Bill 63 is passing, and you can, I think if you're trying to cross things off your list, this is one you could probably cross off. I think it will go through. It allows schools to retain a certain number of nasal sprays to treat anaphylaxis. It's a good thing, I think, for most people. Make sure people are trained, but I don't think you need to be really on that unless you have a school nurse who's really concerned about that. HB 66, material subject to disclosure under the right to know law. This is going to the floor on Thursday, so I can't tell you if it's going to pass or not. However, it's coming out of the committee with an amendment, 16-9, that it ought to pass. This is a bill that has gone through, I don't even know how many iterations between last year and this year. It will go through at some level, I believe. So, last year, they added things about being able to charge people for right to know requests, and they want to take it out. They want to change what you can charge people for, what you can't charge people for, so.
Because this bill, we opposed it at first, and it's better now, but it's still not great.
Unless you are spending a lot of time on right to know requests, or this is an area that is costly to the district, you might want to watch this one, but I wouldn't put a lot of energy into it, it's going to come out however it comes out in the end, and we will have to comply with it, that's, it won't be worse off than you are now.
Association is working hard to get it. FYI.
House Bill 71, this prohibits public schools from being used as a shelter for undocumented people who have not been admitted into the United States legally. Again, this has been amended multiple times. It is going to go to the Senate. It has passed the Senate, it passed the committee. We'll see where it goes. Went to fiscal committee, it's come out multiple times. The catalyst for this bill is, I mean, I think everyone knows what the catalyst for the bill is, but the way that it came. It was articulated to the committees was that, you know, there's a lot of issues with this bill, obviously. You know, who in this, first of all, if a school district is being used as a shelter, the kids are probably not in school in that moment because there's an emergency where people need to be in a shelter. So if your school is a shelter, there's not going to be students in there. If it's during the summer, also, like, you know, people seem to think, well, can we just say, well, they can't do it during the school year, but they can use it during the summer, right? And it's just getting really complicated. So also none of your school district staff who are working in your front office are going to be checking people's documents to determine whether or not they can come in and use the building as a shelter, you know, who is doing that? So there's a lot of problems with this bill. Again, it's really just meant as a.
Do the sponsors have a singular historical example of it ever happening in state of New Hampshire? That's what I think.
You wouldn't know because people aren't checking.
You wouldn't know.
But it's meant to.
I love solutions without.
There was a bill about, I forget what that bill was, when you were talking to Representative Noble in the hallway, you guys were, has this ever happened in the school in New Hampshire? And she said, well, no, but I want to make sure it's.
Right. And this is national issues that are being pushed forward at a local level by people who are asked to be pushed through. So whether or not you want to take a stance on this or not, that is completely up to you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Providing shelter, can that not just be that we have a student in the school period? Could it be interpreted that way? Like if we have a kid who is not legal and they're in the school period, taking classes, whatever.
I didn't have the impression that that was the. I think this was explicitly about the example. I mean, Lisa, you had talked about an example in New York, right?
Localities who are housing undocumented people or new Americans as part of programs that are federally funded and those kinds of things. I think that is the intention. I don't think they could come for individual students. I mean,
Let's say there was an ice
I
storm
don't believe so.
and Portsmouth didn't have power for a week, but you got power at school to give shelter and food and clothing. And you had an undocumented student come and get a sandwich and some water. I don't think that's what this is talking about.
No, there were some states who were.
That was our main concern.
No.
There were some states supposedly who were part of federal programs who were saying school is closed today because we have new Americans who are coming or undocumented people coming and we need a place to house them, so we're canceling school today. That seemed to
That's like the
be,
big
that
story.
seemed to be.
I'm seeing better wording.
Yeah.
Short term means duration not to exceed 72 hours.
Yeah.
I think this is written in a way that it pertains to nobody.
Yeah,
Yeah.
There's no way that, you know.
Yeah.
right. So there's that. House Bill 90, the definition of part-time teachers. This is one of those, you know, boomerang bills that just keeps coming back over and over again. So it's been amended a number of times. Basically, it does leave it wide open. It basically says if a person works less than 20 hours per week, which if you're just counting FaceTime with students, could be a full-time thing. They don't need to be certified ever. They never need to become licensed. They still supposedly fall under the code of conduct, although I'm not sure what you're revoking if they don't have a license. So again, it's a little bit of a.
Yep.
The original catalyst came from teaching AP classes and running start classes, saying that we don't have anybody at the high school level who can teach these classes. People who are employed by the community college system are able to come over, but the district has no way of hiring them to do such a thing because they're not covered under these laws. So if you waive this, so to speak, community college faculty could come over and teach an AP or running start class. That was the catalyst for the bill. It's now become anybody who wants.
Anybody off the street.
Teach whatever you want, as long as you have expertise or significant professional experience.
Conversely, they're making it more difficult for teachers that are certified to maintain.
Their certification. Right. So if finding people to teach your AP or Running Start has been an issue, you should care about this bill. Or if you're having a hard time filling teaching positions where this would help you, you should care about this bill. If not, I think I would let it go for now. Some version of it is going to probably pass this year because they've been trying to pass this bill for 3 sessions. But I leave that up to all of you. House Bill 108, relative to bullying and cyberbullying across multiple school districts. This bill has also gone through multiple iterations. Again, the issue was that there was a student who had been bullied in one school district by a student in another school district, and it was cyberbullying. And for whatever reason, both districts thought the other one was starting the investigation, so no one started the investigation. That's the catalyst for this bill. So this allows the two districts to talk about the issue, and wherever it is reported first is responsible for starting the bullying investigation. Again, I'm not sure how you know, once you call the other district and say, hey, this is about this bullying, and the person says no, and you know, the first one, but.
So I'm trying to understand that from the summary. So it says, so it's the potential victims district who would initiate?
I would-
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay, can you tell from the summary?
Whoever hears about it first had the duty to
Okay.
start the investigation, because it might get reported to your high school principal that Zach was bullying Sally at the football game, and Sally lives in Rochester.
Got it.
So if you're the principal, you've got
And I
to,
got the first
you
note.
could still have been the bully.
Okay.
Who was reported by presumably a third party.
It'll impact
I
your.
mean, some testimony would basically, this is gonna just make sure that the principal does something, then fine.
And then they got off on a rabbit hole about.
What happens if it's, what if it's over state lines? And
Right.
do we have to call the attorney general if it's international, like it's only by. Foreign, where is this going?
That was our question, I think, was to retain the investigation within the school and not to immediately be criminalizing. Not so.
Right, it was just, have your, if the Portsmouth high school principal gets word of it and involve a kid from Dover, have your guy call the principal of Dover High School and have a
It
conversation.
says in such cases that it's cross districts. The investigation shall be initiated by the principal or designate of the first district to learn of the incident.
Right.
That's, so it'll change up day-to-day procedures, maybe a little, but not.
We don't have a ton of this anyway.
I wouldn't put that on your, right now.
Have an easy one.
House Bill 115, the universal eligibility is in the state budget. It basically ups the cap to 400% for this coming year for 26-27, and then gets rid of the cap altogether after that. It's in the budget again. I would put it in the bucket of how you want to respond to whatever version of the budget is moving down the line. That's in there.
It's also on the docket for Thursday.
I suppose, right.
I'll be speaking against it, and I think Kelly will speak, but it's also, we opt past it, right? I know, we'll speak against it.
House Bill 129, relative to the definition of evidence-based, that's retained, so there will be a group of people working on it, so I would just not, if you want to worry about what's happening in those work sessions, great, but you don't need to do anything with
I
it.
think there's also language in budget on this too. I think it also made an engagement. I think so.
Wow. What is the budget language on that?
It's still this evidence-based thing again.
I think it's
The
still.
one that put this bill in is.
It's a bit different.
It's not the whole.
Yeah, let me let go, you're,
That could
I mean,
be,
you
but-
know.
Well, I don't know. You just move
The
along.
interesting thing about this, though, let's say this were to go through, or let's say it at least passes the House. It opens the door for our testimony for a lot of bills the rest of the session, a lot of stuff that's coming out of the Department of Education. Our vouchers, are vouchers evidence-based to improve student outcomes?
Right.
Tell me that, right?
You use this many studies in this type of way in order to,
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, not that it changes how they're gonna vote, but sometimes Becky and I need our own level of entertainment when we're Yellow, you know, sleeping house.
I know we spoke against it in
I know we
division,
did too.
but my feeling is that it got in H two,
Okay, I'll
but I
double
don't
check.
know for sure.
You know, is there any evidence that the parental bill of rights is gonna increase student outcomes? Show me the study.
Sorry, I have to dig through some things.
That's a good follow-up, because I think that is an important one that could be a hand grenade on a whole bunch of different issues in the future.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
That's what I'm worried about.
Okay,
Science.
House Bill 131, cell phone policies in schools, there's also a companion bill from the Senate. Some version of this will go through, it's going to mandate that school districts have a policy around cell phone use in school. The aspects of what's in the policy are pretty much still up to the local district in terms of what you want to put into the policy, but there are some certain aspects you need to include. What parts of the day can students use their cell phones or not? Some sort of statement about how kids can use them during instructional time or not, when kids might be able to use it at a teacher's discretion, et cetera.
I'm sorry, Rebecca, I didn't
Go ahead.
mean to-
Go ahead.
the one thing that we're gonna wanna be mindful of, and I think even Republicans were sympathetic to this, was, you know, NEA and AFT said we support this, but please do something, and this may just be a school board policy issue. Please don't make us being the jerk that's taking the phone away all the time. We don't wanna, you know, you can't put that onus on teachers to be the cell phone police all the time. And, you know, I presume without knowing that at least most districts that have a high school, and probably a middle school, have some cell phone policy to some extent. They vary all over the map across the state. So if we're gonna get something, there were one Senate bill, 2 House bills about cell phone use. And the governor mentioned in her inaugural address that it was gonna be a priority for her, so we know we'll get something.
So this one seems pretty tame. It's just like, just have a policy.
Exactly.
The Senate one of the Senate ones looks like there was like a prescribed process.
Yeah.
About how you were going to develop. Okay,
Yeah,
that's on, okay.
Yeah, even Senate ad even had some, even though it was Republican, that senator put it in. Senate ad had some significant concerns with the Senate.
Okay.
And there's a lot of discussion about trying to make it broad enough because you are gonna have, some school districts that don't have schools. B, some school districts that have like a K-4 school and no middle or high school.
Right.
So the cell phone policy at a K-2 school is gonna look a whole lot different than it might look for a district that has a 7-8 or a middle high school or something like that.
And it's also going to, whatever comes through. It's going to with no intent and no purpose to do this, it's going to widen the inequity gaps across school districts. You may have heard, Zach, administrators heard of those yonder bags.
Mhm, yep.
You know, and sure the board members may have it as well too. You know, if Portsmouth needed to purchase 500 yonder bags at $30 a pop, you'll do that. Franklin is not going to be able to purchase those yonder bags, so it's just that there was one bill, I doubt they'll put it in the budget, there was one bill
They
that
took the
did have an appropriation.
The appropriation.
Yeah, for like, I feel like it was
For a bunch of the
$150,000 to, you know, at least split some of the costs statewide for some of these, but. You know, it's going to, you know, if a district wants to purchase the yonder bag, certain districts will be able to do that. Certain districts
Those are the pouches that you stick your phone in for the whole day.
Correct.
Theoretically, they're.
Well, nice thing about-
Theoretically.
Sorry.
I know.
Right, kids can carry their own devices, which has been a concern for parents,
Yeah.
that the bags let the kid retain their device. And that there are places in the school with the magnets where they can undo them like during break or lunch or whatever. So I think everybody's sort of making their own way with that. Okay. Yeah. Cell phones, okay, House Bill 137, excess swept.
Yeah.
That's inexpedient to legislate for the moment, so there are multiple swept bills, but that one is ITL, so I would get rid of that. House Bill 148, and there is a companion Senate bill, I don't know what the numbers this year, I apologize. Permitting classifications of individuals based on biological sex under certain circumstances. This does not mandate that the district do anything, however, it allows you to classify certain areas by sex if you choose, without violating anti-discrimination laws. So locker rooms, bathrooms, other private spaces, things like that. It would allow a school district to say, these are only available to biologically based girls in the locker room, et cetera, and you would not be violating the law. The anti-discrimination law. You
But it
would
doesn't
be-
mandate
doesn't
exclusively the
mandate.
two, okay.
It just allows it. It's not, again, it's by most people's estimation, not a good bill, because it does allow for discrimination in certain circumstances, basically. It is a rollback of a lot of those protections that people have had, so, but in terms of your own values at the district level, you'll have to decide sort of how to manage that. Sports teams are the other things where it's allowed under this bill. House Bill 184 is a study committee to talk about changing start times of schools. Again, this is a national trend. It's a study committee, whether you want to put a lot of energy into that. I would, personally, with all the other things that you have going on, I would set this to the side.
I think it's gonna go through, but an NHSBA will certainly be at the study committee meetings when this goes through, but this has. It's the type of thing that seems kind of like not a silly idea, but like. It just, I can see this going, anytime it gets to a legislative committee, respectfully. Things can go sideways real quick, and if nobody's watching. You know, the report comes out, the next thing you know, a bill is in to mandate this or mandate that, and you're like, what the hell is this? You know, we testified, we didn't take a position on it. You know, we laid out the issues ahead of time. I was like, this is not just about changing start times. There are 1,000 things that need to be contemplated before a district just does that.
Well, we changed ours a few years ago.
I remember.
High school, and it was a big.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the years.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah,
It just doesn't feel like a legislative level.
right, and it was.
The grain size is off, so it's like.
Say for your buses when they change your stuff.
Yeah.
We brought that up.
Wouldn't that be great?
Keene, I think this representative is from Peterborough, and I think it was Keene. Did the same thing. They studied it over a couple of years and brought in parents and had open forums. And one of the reps was like, well, Keene and Portsmouth did this on their own. Why do we need to study this? Why can't local districts come up with their own solutions?
So House Bill 193, maximum number of credits for courses for dual and concurrent enrollment. I wouldn't worry too much about this one. This just allows students to take more credits for dual enrollment, but it's all about who's paying for the credits, and what amount the state has to pay for the credits versus the parent. So it's about money coming to the community college system. It's not going to impact your daily practice.
It's in the budget.
It lets them take more classes potentially than is current, or did I?
Potentially,
I know it's.
yes, it's an additional 1 or 2 credit.
Can't
One
more
credit
than 4
course.
credits per class.
Right.
Right.
You take more than.
Of course, I mean, it's been a hot minute since I have been in a college class, but I can't remember too many high school dual concurrent classes that would be more than 4 credits per
No.
class. It's a lot of credits for a course. So,
Great.
House Bill 195. This is a complicated bill about privacy. I don't think it's specifically just about schools and school boards, so I would probably maybe keep an eye on this one, but it's not to what I can tell so far, I would not spend a lot of time on it. It's about the privacy that the state is keeping data, what data they're keeping, things like that, and sort of, there may be some trickle down to the school district, but I wouldn't put a whole lot of time on that unless you are a district who's been struggling with student privacy for some reason. So we've had some districts that have been hacked, things like that, that may be more of a priority. House Bill 197 is about retirement. This has been retained. There is some language in the budget about retirement, but not for group 1, for group 2. So I would just, again, if they'll have to work on this between now and the fall, you can just keep an eye on it. I don't think you need to worry about it. House Bill 208, the certification for the school nurses. It's about who is supervising school nurses, first of all, in terms of their credential. It's not at the local level per se, and it changes again that in order to be a school nurse, you don't have to have pediatric experience, you just need to be a registered nurse. There's still issues, I guess, with districts who cannot hire a school nurse who meets the current criteria. The Department of Ed does not want to oversee school nurses because they say they're nurses, they should go to the medical field. The medical people don't want to oversee school nurses' licenses because they say, well, they're school-based personnel. So there's this ongoing argument about who's going to supervise them.
For like 7 years.
Right, so it gets rid of something about school-based pediatric experience and just says any RN can be hired as a school nurse, and I believe it puts the onus back on OPLC, which is the licensing for everything that's not school. So you can just keep an eye on that, and if you need to hire a school nurse next year, double check this and it might open some doors for you. Workers' comp, incredible service towards retirement. Again, this is retained, so I think you can set that one aside for this moment. My guess is they'll take all the retirement bills and work on them in like a big group work session. So if anyone's really invested in that, you can certainly watch or participate in a work session over the summer. Repealing the MOU for chartered schools. I don't know how much of a problem this has been for you, especially with getting back your MOUs from the public charter school.
We don't have any
Okay,
relationship. Is there a backdoor in there? I was trying to read the summary and understand if there was a backdoor comment.
The problem is that some public charter schools are not signing the MOU because they can't agree with the local public school districts of the sending school districts about what should be in the MOU, like costs. It's all about, these are agreements about between the public charter school staff and the sending district staff about how special ed will be provided. It's not individual about kids. Kids are getting their services. So it's about whether or not, who's paying for what is the rate for you're gonna pay, who's supervising this person, blah, blah, blah. So some districts are having a hard time getting them back to the point where they just want to repeal it. But I don't know that that's going to go through, to be honest. I think the Senate is gonna they're gonna say, no, you have to pass it anyway.
But Zach, you said there's no issue in our district.
We don't have it. This is a hypothetical for us.
Okay,
House Bill 227, licensure for psychotherapy activities or services. It did pass. You can keep an eye on it. It's really about supervision for psychotherapists who need supervision hours for their license. I don't think it will apply specifically to school districts in terms of your obligations to supervise people or anything like that. It's going to affect you only in that you would need to make sure you allow those people to leave to get their supervision time, or that they're hooked up with somebody who for their CEUs and things like that. It's going to be a supervision issue from a personnel standpoint, but I don't think it'll affect individual students.
Now some fun ones in then.
273, access to your library records. So again, anything that says it's amended, this one is not amended, so I will pull it up and double check, but some of them don't apply to school libraries. They only apply to public municipal libraries. Some do apply to libraries that are in your school. So let me make sure that I'm saying that.
In Portsmouth, we have a really connected circulation practice where students in the school may get books from the public
Right.
library and vice versa.
Right.
Students can return or check
That's
out for
pretty
either
common.
place.
Yeah.
So does that
We double
effectively mean
check.
if it's the public library, it
That's
still
being
affects the
so
school?
important. All library records related to a minor's current borrowing of printed library materials and AV materials such as DVDs and CDs. If you guys are taking out DVDs and CDs, let me know. I don't know.
You have to take out a DVD, you have to take out a CD player. I don't know what. Yeah. Maybe, know the CD player, right?
Spelled. Shall be available to the parent or legal guardian of the minor when requested by the parent or legal guardian whose address matches that on the minor's library account. So it's RSA 201D. I don't know if that applies to schools or not.
I figured a student's, and I wish I had a librarian here, but I figured a student's school-based library record applies under FERPA and they would have access, parent would have access.
Yeah, this was interestingly enough, this may or may not be the bill, under the right to know law.
Yeah.
The exemptions, RSA 91A5, the exempt.
Okay.
Library user material is exempt from disclosure in public libraries, so.
Right, so
So I can't go in and ask what book Zach is taking
Right,
out.
right.
Could a parent like, You know, if I'm a parent. and
I feel like in a federal law-
I wanna know what kids, books my kid took out, like. are you
I think I have a right to that under
Right.
federal law.
Yeah, have your librarian take a look at it and have your librarian call the city librarian just to see where they are on it.
I'll let you know if it keeps moving forward, but again,
Because the connections would be curious, like my middle schooler can ask the
Correct.
library in the middle school for something in
Correct.
the public library, and I will get an email as a parent that just tells me they have a book available. They
Right.
won't tell me what the book is.
I gotcha.
right, but if you
So,
ask.
You know, and you know what's lost in all of this? We all have kids, right? You know,
I'm just glad.
I don't bring up my personal life when I'm at the legislature, but. When my daughter was 12 years old, the Hunger Games books were very, very popular. We knew that my daughter was just a little less mature than some of her peers, and we did not want her reading them. And the fights and the yelling and screaming, and you know what? She didn't get her hands on the goddamn book anyway. She borrowed it from a friend or something and read it under her powers and under the flashlight. Right, she got her hands on the book anyway. All this stuff about reading. They get.
Parent stream, I think that's.
Well, Mike, Mike did the same thing with reading it. I was just so happy he was reading.
I mean, you know, my daughter.
Yeah.
I don't think about the reading with my daughter, but I mean, just like, I'm thinking of all the fights.
So we're gonna have that one.
Goddamn book.
Yeah.
reading level at a young age.
Right.
And my parents were like, no, you can't read Stephen King in seventh grade.
Right, and you got your hands on it anyway.
Your parents call the library, they have to say, yep, she took out Stephen King. You have to deal with the consequences. House Bill 283 was the limiting of the adequate ed content subjects, that's what ITL, so far it hasn't shown up anywhere else, knock on wood. So I would let that one go for the moment. If it comes back, everyone will be worried about it and you'll know. 293, preventing minors from accessing obscenity on certain electronic devices with internet access. This is actually not specific to schools. This is about when you buy. What's the right one?
Yeah, what's the legislative ability to enforce this?
I have no idea how to ever enforce this. This says when a person buys a cell phone for a minor, you have to sort of declare that, like if you're at the Verizon store, and the Verizon store has to uninstall or install some sort of filter that would not allow the person on the phone to access any obscenity or pornographic material or anything like that, unless the parent removes it and there's a special way to do that. So I don't think we need to be worrying too much about this at the moment. If it changes and becomes very specific, somehow school personnel would have to deal with that. I will let you.
And Verizon will stop selling phones.
I mean, oh my God, really?
You're not big enough.
Keep track of my own.
And who's deciding what obscenity is?
Well, right.
DOE.
The prime spot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. that was-
Ellie.
Gonna look value.
Right. Okay, and that's also been retained, so they'll be working on that one to save your life. It's very hard to keep track of, so I would let go of that. Making school building aid program funds non-lapsing, that's been retained. Again, there'll be a work session on that. This is a valiant effort by Representative Cahill, who brings us back year after year and really wants to do the right thing with building aid and just can't get it where it needs to be. But I wouldn't spend a lot of time worrying about that right now. House Bill 324, prohibiting obscene or harmful sexual materials in schools. Again, there's another companion bill. I want to say it's 33. This is about really about access to books in schools and book banning, for lack of a better term. And what should or should not be available at the school district for students of a given age or a given grade. So again, we have tried year after year to make, this is one of those, we'll make a bad bill less bad, and try to make it workable.
Or even constitutional.
Or constitutional, that would be less.
Less.
But part of the problem is there has now been, over the last couple iterations of this, pretty specific processes that school districts have to identify and school boards have to create about what parents or community members can do if they disagree with a book that is in the library, for example, what the process is to raise that to the school board, what kinds of hearings you have to have, et cetera, what decision the school board has to make. school boards have complied with that over the last several years. The problem is the people that are bringing the concerns don't like the outcomes of the process. It's not an issue with the process any longer. It's an issue with the outcome of the process. So school boards have been doing, I think, a really good job at following their processes for letting people bring their concerns to the school board, addressing the concerns in a public forum, allowing for public comment, et cetera, and the school board making those decisions. The issue is that school boards are making decisions that the people bringing the concerns don't like. So now they are going to make it more complicated. And basically, you know, say you have to bring it to the state board and the state board gets to decide whether or not you made the right call, so to speak, with this book.
I mean, there's so as Becky mentioned, the companion bill was Senate Bill 33.
Yeah.
That passed out of the Senate a week or two ago, not unamended. I provided an amendment that I thought had some good traction with Senate Ed, but I'm guessing, and they voted to re-refer it back to Senate Ed. Senate Ed,
Working on it.
that was the recommendation. And I'm guessing Senator Avard did not want his bill re-referred. So curiously, they voted again. So the senators on Senate Ed voted against their own recommendation when they got to the floor of the Senate and passed it through unamended. Senate Bill 33, while not great, is significantly better than House Bill 324. So if you're advocating on that and you by chance get asked what's your preference, Senate Bill 33 is less bad, and I think we can find a way to make Senate Bill 33 work, even though it's not ideal. First of all, Senate Bill 33 does not have the criminal penalties in it that House Bill 324 has, and Senate Bill 33 does not have the appeal to the State Board of Education that.
So if this is somewhere that the board wants to take a position on.
Let me know and I'll give you the thoughts.
And would both of those take out local control by?
To some extent, because, well, first of all,
Senate Bill 33, no, the decision ends with the school board. The question that you always have to be mindful of, though, is that the current State Board of Education has taken a very expansive interpretation of Department of Education Rule 200, which basically states any person with a complaint against the local schools can bring it to the state board. Prior to 8 years ago, that was never how it was interpreted. There had to be almost a case of controversy.
but this bill specifically allows you to.
324 specifically allowed you. But my point being, if Senate Bill 33 were to go through, and even if the bill does not specifically allow for an appeal to the State Board of Education, Frank Edelblum and Drew Klein will line up a parent to do the complaint, get an unfavorable outcome to the parent, appeal to the state board, and this state board will hear the matter. And then the school district is going to have to say you don't have jurisdiction, and it's going to have to go to the Supreme Court.
I think your talking points on this would be quite helpful. This is definitely.
Definitely a focus.
Right.
How we want it.
The version of the bill, that's
Yeah, it's gonna
324.
play out 3 years.
It allows a parent to appeal the school board's decision to the state board, but it also gives a caveat that the aggrieved parent that brings it to the state board does not have to be the original person who made the complaint. Just has to be a parent whose kid has access to these things now that they've realized that the school board didn't make whatever decision that they agree with. So.
Hand the baton on.
Right.
Yeah,
And the school board, here's my complaint, and they say, no, this book is okay, we're gonna leave it in the library, but there it is. Also a parent of a student in that school, they can bring the appeal to the state board, I don't have to bring it. So it's sort of and they don't have to go through the process that I just went through, they can just sort of jump the line with that, so.
And the parents are deciding that it's obscene.
Correct.
Well, it's
I mean,
324 has very specific definitions about
Yeah. I'd like to read
nudity
it.
and sadomasochism and genitalia, and so, I'm thinking of Shakespeare that had innuendos for
All
all
these
these.
classics are coming to mind.
Correct.
It's very-
I just read Macbeth and it was fun.
So
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I show, Venus, or is Michelangelo nude up on the top?
Oh, all those art books.
Right?
Oh.
You band on this or write something or whatever, there could do some like that, I guess, you don't help.
Okay, we'll find where it is. Yeah,
329 is inexpedient to legislate. Again, this is just really a problem that's not a problem. I think if if it's too hot, if you have buildings that are too hot or too cold because they're older buildings, and just have a plan of what to do if it's too hot or too cold. I mean, that would eliminate the need for this bill, really. There are some schools, districts apparently where the buildings are getting extremely hot and they're not sending the kids home or not calling a hot day. It is a problem in some buildings, but some of it is the state of our school buildings.
But they won't give a building.
But has not considered what to do in that situation. It would be good you to talk about what you're going to do in that situation. If it's 50 degrees in one room and 27 in the other room, then you have a plan so that your teachers and your kids are not.
We don't have to have plans for snow days. We don't need to have a developed plan for hot days either.
Take care.
Use your best judgment. And if the people like the decision, believe me, they'll let you know,
I
right?
mean, some of the people all the time,
That's right.
people.
School building aid is retained 366, so that's that. 384 has been ITL, 388 has been ITL, 398 is ITL, these are the numbers we can flip through those. 415 are the same. 494 Math Learning Communities Program. This is a program that's run through the community college system with high schools to try to prep students to be better ready for college level math. If you are participating in this program, you should care a great deal about this bill. If you're not, I would let it go for now and just make sure that people are doing it and that there's some money for the community college system to help with it. That's all that. 515 ITL, 520. This is the subpoena bill. This bill is moving forward. It's different than last year's in that it doesn't call out the commissioner to be the person that can subpoena. It is the complaint or hearing officers, complaint officers and investigators that can subpoena things and your people.
Still really bad.
It's not good, but it is less bad. To somebody's point earlier, the implications of this depend a lot on the implications of whether or not some other things go through, because I think then they might have more reason to want to subpoena certain things like documents or books or papers or whatever you're doing in class or lesson plans, versus if those things don't go through, what they can subpoena is more limited.
And what's lost in all this conversation is the impetus for this 2 years ago was relative to the divisive concepts law, so it had nothing to do with teacher conduct and the code of conduct, that had to do with student safety, that had to do with what books would be taught in schools.
Can I ask a question? Is this something that I should worry about, per se, they're trying to subpoena who comes to a particular club?
I don't think they could subpoena that per se.
But could they subpoena a Google Classroom about something?
Yeah, if you were.
It has to be, the subpoena would have to be I forget what the language is, but basically reasonably related to an alleged violation of the teacher code of conduct.
So this is a question that's come up for us, and we're talking about this in our policy committee soon. But as we are contemplating what protections we have in our district, particularly the LGBTQ+ students,
Correct.
if certain laws pass at the state or federal level and they have subpoena power,
Correct.
what are the
If you want some
implications
talk,
for our faculty?
if you want some talk.
That's a bigger question.
Well, the other bigger question too is, and nobody was paid attention to me. All we hear at the LOB for the last however many years is yammering about parental rights. I said, there's no protection for kids in this. I said, are you gonna subpoena student records? Are you gonna subpoena a student? And if I'm a parent and I get notice that my 12-year-old kid has been subpoenaed because they may have been a witness or something and I don't show up, what are you gonna do? Throw me in jail because I don't want my kid talking to an investigator at the Department of Education? They all just kind of looked at me. I said, seriously, what are you going to do to the parent that doesn't comply with the subpoena? And what's the department going to do with their access to student records? We have access to them, I'll only retain them. But, be mindful about, how this relates to,
Book requests.
a book request, library records, Or even, you know, the kid that is struggling with his or her gender identity or orientation. It makes a friend and a teacher slips the kid a book. You know, after hours and say, this book might be, you might be interested in reading this book, I had a copy of the house, right?
That's for persons, books, papers, documents, and other items for the purpose of carrying out investigations pursuant to the code of conduct. So if you want to relook at the code of conduct and look at the different sections, you know, responsibility to students, using technology appropriately, you know, those kinds of things. That's where I think you could use your example as to, you know, what is your process for students signing up for extracurriculars or for clubs? You know, is there a perception, or could there be a perception that you were not,
But
you know, being forthcoming about what's available or something like
tie
that?
this into the parental bill of rights. And tie this into, we didn't get to it, where Glad has a bill in to charge the State Board of Education to expand the code of conduct to include responsibilities. To get as far afield from what the original purpose of the code of conduct initially was.
We're talking points on this one, yeah, for.
Yeah, follow up with that, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, somebody talked about how it's all interrelated. You gotta look at 6 different bills and tie the strings together like the FBI when they're trying to solve the crime and using the mafia and whatnot. It's all interrelated.
527 has been PTO. There is some aspect of SWEP in the school budget in terms of the donor counts, but that will be subject. 534 is ITL. 549 has been indefinitely postponed, so there can't be any other bills that are similar enough in language that can come back before the end of 2027. And that's about prohibiting people from using the EFA accounts in religious institutions, so don't worry about that for now. 550 has been ITL, 555 is ITL, 563, this is retained because a lot of it is in the budget already in terms of the formula and things like that and how they're going to do some of that. So again, there'll be a work session about this. They're retaining it so they can make sure they work on it depending on what happens with the budget, what happens with the lawsuits from Pond Valley. 571 Constitution Day in public schools, that did pass.
Of course.
It's like it's akin to Veterans Day and Memorial Day, that we don't have a special day to recognize the Constitution, and shouldn't we have something on Constitution Day like we do for Veterans Day and Memorial Day? That's sort of the
We
general.
can't talk about the slavery aspect because it's quite some concept.
So,
Well, every year we're gonna add a new day because somebody's got to their new, they want to.
that's where therein lies the rub. You know, it's not some value in eating doing this, but value in other things that actually won't get their own day, so I guess we'll see. 603 is ITL, 699, this is a bill that is just a hot mess, lack of better.
So one.
So the original intention of this bill supposedly, so for anyone who doesn't know, the Department of Ed is undergoing their second fairly substantial audit for special education. How well is the department stewarding their special education funds? It's a lengthy audit. It's taking a whole year. There's something like 75 you know, things they need to correct so far, a lot of things. The committee was told, Representative Kutab from Windham brought this bill. The committee was told that the department asked Representative Kutab to put in this bill that was going to clarify some issues with the definitions in special ed as a result of some of the findings of the audit, which is not public yet, by the way. So nobody really can see what the issue is. So it redid a bunch of definitions under special ed law, under IDEA. I don't necessarily, this is my personal feeling, think that it really is nefarious, so to speak, but what happened was
Which had needs well.
once they took out all of the definitions for related services, and then rewrote the academic services aspects of special ed in this bill. And, you know, to talk about, you know, the thread that ties all through, we'll get to that in a minute, but the way that it was interpreted by the disability community was that they were removing students' rights to related services and
The
things like
hearing
that.
was a disaster.
So it was not, I don't believe that was the intention. That being said,
So this was on our radar because of some of that advocacy, we
Yeah.
heard from
Yes.
some people who were concerned
that
about.
being said.
Well, that's fine.
It's been changed a little bit to try to make it better, the related services have been put back in, however. I think the committee had the opportunity to just retain this bill. In good faith to the
Mhm.
families that showed up for that hearing and and they did not do that, they pushed it through anyways. At the same time, to sort of walk down a different path, there's a lot of conversations and a lot of other bills having to do with Medicaid to schools and medically related academic services that are happening in schools. And with the federal overlay of moving special ed under HHS potentially, the possibility that the changes in these definitions would allow at the state level for them to take out medically related services, things like OT, PT, speech, and move those to some extent under HHS. And kind of, shift the idea that those are really special ed, they're actually not, they're really health related. And to try to sort of create this chasm between academic necessary services under special ed and medically related services that are being provided in a school building. So for what it's worth, this bill is going through. The disability community is not a fan of this bill. I don't think it was intentionally made to be out of spite, but I think it might have been hijacked now to be a vehicle to move some other things. So if you're concerned about special ed as a whole in the state and how that is going to get funded and or who's responsible for it and or whether it's going to move under HHS, I would keep an eye on it. There's not much to do with the current moment. There's been no hearing scheduled in the Senate at this point, but it will be for. House Bill 739, excess funds paid to municipalities for school districts. This is the excess fund that is now in the budget. So I would keep an eye on it under your budget bucket that you're watching the budget as. That one's not even a thing. I don't know why it's still on here. Senate Bill 20, this has been tabled, so it could come off the table at some point, but they've got an awful lot on their plate. I don't imagine it will. If it does, it'll come off as part of the budget conversation, probably more than anything, not as a standalone bill.
This is a mirror to that House bill that went away.
This is about, I believe this is about, remember when the state was supposed to pick up a certain portion of a retirement, then they said no, and then over the past couple of years, they've tried to keep relaying that back up and say, well, the state's gonna pick up 7.5% or whatever. It's just adding to that so that the state would pick up some more, but again, it's sort of. Should they? Yes. Is it gonna go anywhere? I'm not sure. Senate Bill 33 is the companion bill for the obscene materials and the book objectionable material book, so you can look at that. That would fall in line with the other one that you were watching. Senate Bill 38, state recognition of biological sex has been tabled. That's because there is again that companion bill in the House about allowing you to discriminate in certain circumstances or recognize biological sex in athletics. There's like 4 or 5 bills around that issue, so they tabled this one, I believe, so they can hold on to it in case they need to bring it back up at some point if something's not going the way they hoped, that they would have this one sort of sitting on the side that then they can take it off the table and do what they want with it. Senate Bill 72 is the Senate's version of the parental rights. This is the one that's solely about education. It doesn't include the medical aspect of it, so it's a bit plainer. I don't think either of them are really great or student focused, but here they are. Senate Bill 206 is the companion bill about the cell phone policies. And that one's moving forward. And Senate Bill 208 about.
That was ITL committee, actually.
Oh, I thought it was.
No, they ITL. No, they referred 33, the ITL 208. So don't worry about 208.
Okay.
No, that's fine. They were talking, it wasn't clear, they were talking about them both at the same time. And they were going to re-refer both of them and also it did not get the way.
After that fire hose of section, if you want to at some point in the next few days, just send me the list of the ones that you really care about. What I will do if you want is keep this list the way you've had it. I'll just make a new like subset of this list I'll call it something a little bit different, but that way you won't lose access to this list. And I can make you a priority list that you can track the same way with that one.
That would be very helpful, and I think just to sort of narrow our focus, if we kind
Yeah.
of, because when I last looked at this a week ago, there was still some, we're still in.
Yeah, if you can narrow it down, and make it look like a.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we can narrow it down. Expedient for a table for now, I don't think we need to focus, probably can have to talk as a committee, but we probably want to look at which of the ones have enough nuance to potentially be either really great or really problematic, and that's where we would want to focus.
And look at the ones too that you think you might be able to move the needle on a little bit too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some, like cell phones, parents' bill of rights, I mean, we'd love to advocate for building aid, but that feels like,
Well, again, when the Senate is doing their budget work, I mean, there's opportunity for people to come and talk or to share your thoughts about what's in the budget. I mean, I think that there is an opportunity for that. And I won't say that the Senate is more reasonable. I don't think that's the right thing to say, but I think that they take a different look at it sometimes in terms of, you know, what they prioritize things a little different, and they're smaller, so
There's
they can
fewer
do it
people
that
you
way.
have to.
They also have what's going in the budget and what's not going to, so they're going to kind of, you know, manhandle it for the next couple of months, so you do have a little time to sort of figure out what in the budget you want to.
They have more constituents too, so they've got more
Right.
people that they're responsible for.
Right.
More public input, right, has more of an impact on.
Yeah. But I share Representative Marie's ideas that if you're gonna send something to a specific committee, two things. One is if it's budgetarily related, you can send it to the whole Senate, but either way, make sure if you're sending it to a committee that you're also including your own legislators, because they may not be on that committee, but that's really important, and you have some really supportive legislators, so.
Email the clerk or the assistant as well too, because so a lot of these reps and senators don't even look at the email, they have the secretary or whoever it is, the aide prints them off and put them in binders for them and they read it, you know, while they're watching TV that night.
So is there anything that you think we've missed, Representative Murray? We're doing so many bills, and we sit down at the beginning and try to
Yeah.
guess which ones are gonna be the biggest potential impact for us.
Well, there are a number of things that are in the budget, but whether or not it's gonna stay in the budget is, you know, anybody's guess.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main, thing. Those things that are concerned to you on the budget, keep track of that, and to let the Senate know you don't want those things in the budget.
No, that's very helpful. We have the city legislative committee, so they are very closely monitoring the excess SWAP and some of the other fiscal issues related to education. for
Yeah,
us
I
as
think
well.
you might wanna be prepared that the SWEP is not going to change, it's gonna,
Yeah.
the Supreme Court's coming down with that, and that will be the end of it. And so I think, you know, I wouldn't hold my breath on that one, I would move forward.
Fair.
Friday, NHSBA is doing a webinar, the legislative update, crossover day, that's from at noon time, probably till 1:30. We will spend some time doing what we just did a little bit on under themes of bills that are moving forward. We'll talk a little bit about what's in the House budget, which you just heard. We'll know a little bit better because it'll be Friday, so it'll be hot off the press. We'll see how well we can keep up in the 12 hours from when you vote until the webinar. Then we're gonna try to spend a little time on Friday talking about how to respond or how not to respond to the things that are coming down federally. And trying to come up with, you know, how as a school board and as a district you're going to approach some of these things, because we're getting a lot of questions about that understandably. And we're also on a learning curve in terms of, you know, sometimes things are coming down that you feel like you must react immediately or else. Most of the things coming down federally have a congressional aspect to them that needs to also go through before they're really effective. Some of them is very similar to the Title IX issue we had over the summer where you can't comply with everything. So local districts need to decide where they would like to take the risk, like what most, you know, embodies your values as a district. Where do you want to fall on some of those things? Because there's no way to do all of it. So there really is some pieces of how to respond to some of those things. But so we'll talk a little bit about that more locally with everybody on the webinar, but just to try to give some people some peace of mind. What's currently as a junction, what doesn't, you know, what who's gonna be the first one to decide they're not gonna do something and see what happens.
Right.
You know, again, so I think there's a lot of that, everybody is in the same boat, fortunately or unfortunately, with that. And our, you know, our Department of Education functions quite a bit differently than our neighboring states. In terms of their perceptions of some of these things and whether or not there's, you know, how they want to
Even
approach that.
your capacity to respond. You know,
Um,
I mean, whether you support it or don't support it, you know, a colleague sent me the response from the New York State Department of Education, it's
Right.
obviously 100 times larger than ours, they got a team of attorneys, but they. It was Brilliant memo, that's a 10-page memo that they had written, sent back to the. Or the USDOE or whoever it was, and just like, we're not complying, and here are 1,000 reasons why we're not complying, and just citation, photos, and I was like. It's not weird.
But you guys, I mean, because you're so close to Maine as well, I mean, their approach to some of this is much different than New Hampshire's response has been, understandably. Massachusetts is the same way, but I think, you know, so to just be minded, everyone understands the situation that people are in and the fact that, you know, everyone's on like catastrophe overload, I think at this point, from things just coming, you know, a constant stream of executive orders and trying to weed through them. So I guess, you know, for whatever it's worth, you're not alone in not knowing how to respond. Everybody, the superintendents are in a difficult position with this certification that they have to sign by Thursday. My understanding is that there's been an
10-day waiver extension.
there's an injunction that's going to be filed, whether that's the hearing for that injunction is on Wednesday again. So I mean, it's like the budget. The hearing is Wednesday, the thing is due on Thursday, and if you don't do it, supposedly.
Thought I saw.
The sky will fall in, but I don't know. Nobody really knows. So
That's the worst part, is not, because as I said to my husband, we were talking about it, it's like they're just throwing things at the wall to see what sticks.
yes.
And
And I think we're in a unique position in New Hampshire because of some previous experience when things have been handed down federally under this particular leadership at the department. The response has not been, well, everyone hold on, we'll figure it out. It has been a different response from the department. So I think everyone is responding in the same way, understandably, which is like, we have to do this or else something horrible is going to happen in the district and we don't want that. At the same time, I don't know that that's the case. And I think that there is some strategy in terms of just, you know, constantly fire hosing these things at everyone to make it to the point where either you stop reacting and you just do the thing, or, you know, you've got everybody so wound up at this point that everything is a big deal and you don't know what to pay attention to. So, but everyone is feeling that way. And I think, you know, it just falls on your board and superintendent relationship to try to have a, you know, rational conversation about what could or could not happen to the extent that you do know. Working with your local council to decide, like, this is a risk we want to take. You know, if it's a kid issue, we want to just fall on the sword in terms of putting the kids first and see what the fallout is. And maybe there will be an injunction in the meanwhile and it won't even matter in the first, you know, or we'll get challenged or whatever. So most of it needs congressional action also, and that hasn't happened. So as scary as it is to get these executive orders at 11:30 p.m. on a Wednesday and it's due on Friday, you know, we're all in that boat, but the likelihood that those things actually can happen that quickly, I mean, DC does not turn on a document that way typically, so I think we're okay. And just to try to model, I guess, not panicking all the time, at least not externally, go with behind closed doors and panic with the rest of us, but we're trying to, you know, everybody is in the same boat. It's not like just Portsmouth has to do this thing or something that will happen. I mean, the whole state would have to be, you know, called to task, which I could have, yes, but not in 12 hours, probably.
This has been so helpful, and I want to thank you.
Very
all
much so,
for
thank
coming.
you.
You guys are great.
Well, for your, it's a heavy lift, and it gets heavier each year, but I appreciate you sticking to it.
Caution. I know we wanted to keep this to a pretty tight meeting. We can try to do a quick round to narrow our list of bills that we want to do for position statement, or we can schedule another meeting in the near future to go through that and make our recommendations to it. I'm open to either option, knowing scheduling is tricky for everyone.
might want to just a random thought, you might want to wait till after Thursday to see what gets passed out of the
yeah.
house.
Yeah,
That's fair.
that is fair.
And our, our legislative update, we doing the webinar. Becky's doing legislation in 12 hours on Friday, we're doing a webinar, and then just trying to get out a legislative update, so if you're back like on early next week after Friday's legislative update comes out, you see what's passed. I mean, you never know what's gonna go happen on the floor, who's gonna come with some of the time, it's relatively uneventful, but you never know, somebody has a hair somewhere, they wanna come with an amendment, some bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Let's take a quick couple minutes to just figure out if we want to go through the bills or if we want to schedule another meeting.
Thank you for including us. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Very much. Yeah, reach out anytime, even if it's just to, commiserate over whether or not we should do that. That's quite fun.
I'll bring a wine.
Yeah, and we're not gonna come out in person, but if you even need 20 minutes of Becky's time, let's do it soon.
Thank you so much.
All right, folks, take care, Zach.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
We left the easy agenda piece where we go through all of this to decide all of our draft position statements in 20 minutes, till now. I think we definitely have a much narrower list of bills now than we did when we sat down, which is good. Are there any, I think there's some probably that we will want to stick with for a bit, just because we have every other year, unless our thoughts have changed. We'd like to pay attention to
This
this.
is the email you sent to 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Which one do you have in your hand?
Which one?
It should be somewhat similar. It gets updated by the hour every time something changes in
Yeah, I know.
Concord, so depending on when it got printed. But the
Okay.
link is live, Nancy.
Okay.
And if you click subscribe, at the top of that, it may not show up on the printout, but if you open it on your computer and click subscribe, then you'll get updates when the bills
Oh, okay.
move through. So that's kind of handy if you'd like to have that volume of email. You can come to the table. I can, it's in the agenda and I can also share it. Oh, that's okay. I can send it to you. See if my computer's actually working.
It's posted online on the city website.
Okay.
If this came all this way, if there's anything that's particularly on your radar or that you've heard from any other educators or staff in the building that they're particularly wanting us to watch, you're welcome. to
No, I
share.
wanted to find out more given the current service.
That is fair.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of the school board process, we go through this every year and then you're welcome. We go through this every year. We try to get to a fairly narrow list of bills, whereas it's for the position formally, and then for a lot of the ones we keep an eye on and we just try to get to it information. And so we can certainly give you a link to our. Yes.
Regarding the DEI, it seems like we should coordinate with the city. Were you gonna report on that, on what the city?
So-
committee-
The city legislative committee met this week and they, in terms of education pieces that they're watching, are mostly watching the excess clout and potential tax implications of where the money will get shuffled around. But as I think you were hearing from Barrett and Becky, because that went through the court system, there's likely to be a lot that we would personally be in a position to oppose by showing up in Concord at this time. So that will have implications for our city budget and our tax allocation going forward that I don't know that we have a ton of control over at this moment. The other question at the city side is sort of big picture, some of the things that Becky and Barrett were alluding to in terms of as more things are coming down as executive orders from Washington that may or may not have big implications for our budget or how we go about doing things, or there's, if you don't do X, then Y will happen to your funding, or Z will happen to, other programs that you rely on the government to support. What do you do? And I'm sure Zach is getting all of these late night messages.
It's an ongoing conversation.
Title IX, now it's Title VI, which has to do with rights and whatever will be next, it seems to keep coming. And we certainly have heard from some people in the district that are wondering, how are we handling this?
Yeah.
And it's kind of come up, no idea if there's, our superintendents around the state talking about.
There is some conversation, I will tell you, that we- so I will tell you that we can go back to the state. We did initially sign off on 6. But we can go back. We don't think that there's anything we're doing right now that we couldn't make a case applies to what's happening at 6. So we initially submitted last week, but we can definitely have a conversation and talk about whether or not we want to pull that back. But we don't think on paper at the moment, and I think this is one of those conversations about when are we going to the wall on things? And we don't think there's anything that we are in fear we couldn't argue doesn't fit within this prescription of 6 at the moment.
So you're not worried, at least with that one right now, about any issues with curriculum, extracurriculars or anything?
Because then I don't think we've got anyone coming in. At the moment, we don't think it's gonna be an issue. I don't think that I know what I saw. Emily had reached out. I think we're able to protect all those situations and be in good shape. We're definitely open to a larger dialogue about it. And if we needed to talk to the state and pull that back, we could. So
I think in terms of the city, I mean, most of what they focus on is specific to finances. They have a lot of things they're watching with the, rooms and meals, taxes, and how much will that stay in Portsmouth, what will that rate be set at? A lot around housing issues and to some extent some issues around climate. Not focused on education, but we're trying to work out a more streamlined process. And advocating is one around bigger financial issues for the district. And we're also trying to have a conversation. They care about local control. So to the extent that we care about local control, where we could say, well, a parent's bill of rights type of bill, or a cell phone bill, or some of the bills that mandate cursive or a specific class to be taught.
Yeah.
All of these things, whether they're good or bad for students to know about them, ultimately are somebody else telling us what our curriculum is going to be. And to the extent we can be in communication with the city around our desire to have a curriculum set locally, that's something they're receptive to. It's not their top priority because they're mainly focused on financial issues, but we're trying as best we can to make sure that we're in alignment with them in terms of what our approach is. And as far as I can tell at this point, the idea of local control is one of their legislative principles. So anything that we would do along those lines would be, I think, very much in keeping with what the city is interested in looking. I think where we sometimes run into questions is we've come up in years past with the board with questions about where should we stand on universal free lunch as an example. And that's a tricky one where I think we all believe that fundamentally kids should have food.
Right.
And we know there's lots of data that says they learn better, they function better, they are behaved and more focused when they are not hungry. It's kind of common sense, but it is also a situation where when we back those bills, we're supporting a donor city model where the funds flow from Portsmouth and then go elsewhere. And then there's a question around what that means for our tax base. So that is an area where the city not necessarily be so, we are independent to what we want with that, but generally we try to align with it.
There's no bill for free meals.
They come up every year. We didn't put it on our list this year because knowing that it's out of step with the city's interest in retaining tax revenue locally to the fullest extent possible, we didn't put it on our list. It also every year fails.
Yeah.
So it's kind of one of those situations where we thought we could really move the needle and get Concord to give a bunch of money out all over the state to give students high quality, healthy meals. That might be a different conversation, but it's really at this point a conversation where we're advocating for something that will ultimately fail anyway. It is also out of step with the legislative priorities of the city. So it's not that we can't fight that fight, but
Yeah, I think we'll be in this ongoing conversation about
Yeah.
to what extent do we want a strong state public education system that we're a part of, and to what extent do we want that versus this, every time we do something that's gonna require more revenue,
Mhm.
what's the offset? Exactly what I'm saying, that's the trade-off.
Right.
And I think we could have different answers depending on the bill
Yeah.
to those.
And like with the library issue, that did come up, because there is definitely some question around when our circulation desks are very much linked and the records are all linked. Something that's only for the city library or only for the school library, we're not really sure where that line is.
Right. Yep.
And don't necessarily wanna run into a situation where they can't have it in school, and then when they go to the other public library, they also can't get the book there. Or, you
Right.
know, parents are getting access to records outside of the school based on. I mean, it's tricky.
No, I agree.
So calendar wise, do we wanna try to take a little time to go through the list? Do we wanna wait till we embarrass everybody at?
Well, they made a point
Yes.
that-
To wait.
to wait to see what actually passes.
Yeah, we run up against this every
You do,
year.
okay.
The challenge becomes, we wait another few weeks to schedule our meeting, and then it'll take another couple weeks to get it to the board. And then we
Okay.
start to run up against the clock at the end of the session with whether we have enough position statements approved by the board to submit before the legislative session is over for the year.
Okay,
So it's a little bit of a fine line. So we tried to get as close to the middle of the
Okay.
process as we could. We could also just do a Zoom meeting. It probably wouldn't take more than a half hour, 45 minutes if we could really narrow down the bills. Is there any, what about this? If we don't want to do it today, is that the consensus? We want to wait? I'm seeing a lot of-
I'd like
Okay,
to overlay.
Friday, that's fine.
Yeah,
So that's fine. So why don't we schedule it now, and then we can come back after. And their NHSBA webinars are recorded if you're not able to watch it because you're working, so you can access. And I can probably share out. Time for more opportunities to watch webinars. But they're pretty good. And I do think a lot of what they went through today, they'll probably do again on the webinar.
that was so helpful.
They're really, really great at breaking it down, and they're so generous with their time to come in. And it saves me from saying it in a totally different way, it makes sense. So I think, are we gonna try to meet before break? That's the other thing that we come up against. Cause if we get into May, then we're perilously close to not having a position before the session.
I think we should be trying, in my head, it's like, what's our ability to have something in front of the board on the 22nd of April?
That means we gotta meet like early next week.
So, I mean,
Which
because once you get beyond that,
Yep.
things start dropping like flies. I mean, what happened last week?
Today.
Yeah.
My only issue is that I do start my new job on Monday.
So what are your hours? Evening?
And I have to drive to Rochester for the first 3 months.
Okay.
It is a 9 to 5 job.
Okay.
So what would be our ability to do a Zoom the week of the 14th? I mean, we've tried to do earlier because I know you're trying to maybe leave your job for the day at some point.
No, I just stay here.
Yeah.
So the other thing, if I'm the only one holding everybody up, I can send a list to you, Lisa, of things that I feel are important. If I can't actually attend this.
No, and that can be very helpful. I mean, we work by consensus on the committee, so we try not to send anything to the board that doesn't have the support of
Right.
everyone on the
I mean,
committee.
if
So
we
certainly,
we could do it.
Yeah.
5.
Are you
Yeah.
sure? I wouldn't wanna, okay.
I would be.
so I'm just looking at that week, and of course, there's always things. So like the high school college fair is, let's see, Monday. Tuesday, I have a conflict, because I'm that's not my conflict.
Oh, it is tax day.
Yeah.
Thank you. I gotta
So
get my,
then- Well, Zach, you usually have the most meetings of all of us, so do you want to start with the blackout days? I can definitely not do Tuesday. I'm gonna be away all.
I could do Wednesday at a Tish time.
Wednesday,
Thursday, I mean, I could, this is the Dundero Spring Concert, but I don't have to. I don't-
Wednesday, what time would work for you?
Primarily anytime after 5:15.
So I would say by me traveling home, 6 o'clock would be good.
That works for me.
Done. I
Okay,
think if we try harder to find another time, we're not gonna.
and we're just
succeed.
gonna do a Zoom.
6
I-
o'clock Zoom.
Probably be easier. for
Thank you all for
everyone.
working with me.
No, thank you for sticking with us. And here's what I will try to do if this works from last year. I tried to group the bills under our 4 sort of legislative advocacy issues that we work around. And I think I will resend to you guys the version of the list where I remove all the ones that are inexpedient or kind of most likely tabled, and then that should let you look at the ones under the different issues, so for school funding, for economic policy, and highlight which ones you think are the most
Perfect.
important. And the statements we tend to make to the board are pretty short and sweet. We're not trying to write a full novel, it would more be something along the lines of, Portsmouth School Board supports local control of school curriculum. We object to the following bills because they are an effort by the state to dictate specific things that must be taught in schools, and then we can even just list off 3 bills.
Mhm.
Or if there are funding bills that we support because they're gonna give more money to the schools, which I don't think we have any of those right now.
What about that one?
But then we would say, we're thrilled to have more money for our public
Yeah.
schools and we therefore support, these 6 bills that are all the deadlines. We don't tend to get into the weeds. And then once the board passes that, anyone can go to Concord on the board and Pestle Queens and a member of the board. Our board has taken a position on these bills, and then you can speak in whatever way you want to speak, if you have time to go, which we won't because
Not for a while anyways,
exactly.
but
Okay, so we're set for
thank you.
We're set for 6 P.M. on
Wednesday.
Wednesday, the 16th. And there is maybe like a 3% chance I might have a conflict, but if that's the case, then I'll just turn it over to somebody else to prepare. I mean, I can,
Okay.
I'm not here and everybody can still go to all this. So,
I'll send you a Zoom link tonight, so
perfect,
you can build into the agenda, and then if the agenda goes to Paulette, she'll get it up.
Yep. perfect. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
You know how to turn this off, Zach?
Yep.
Excellent. Good job. Are you cheating?
No,